Welcome to the Paul Spradley Show, a show dedicated to real strategies from real people practicing real leadership in diverse and inclusive cultures. And now here's your host, CEO of the diversity training firm, the Care-Based Leadership Collaborative, Dr. Paul David Spradley.
Welcome to the show. I'm happy that you're here or watching or listening, whatever it is that you're doing. We've got a great show today, and my guest, we're going to dive right in. He is Dr. Vladimir St. Surin, and I've known Dr. Vladimir. I'm going to call him Vlad for the purpose of the show, because saying Dr. Vladimir St. Surin every 3 seconds is just long. It's going to take a lot. But welcome so much to the show. Dr. Vladimir St. Surin. Vlad, you're the Dean of the School of CCAC.
Yes, sir.
In Homewood, and a man of many, many talents. You were a football star, probably going to the Hall of Fame for Robert Morris University for your sports on the field, but you were also off the field a giant, a leader. And in the community, we've been connected for years now, man. Just every opportunity we have to be able to work together, it seems like it's worked out well. Like, we've done projects and they've always been just great. So I had to have you on the show, man.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it that comes down to is really trust, right? You know, you grow as a man, you know, coming to a school where you're not really familiar with, and you're in culture shock, and you meet people who look like you, and you're like, I'm gonna attach myself to that person, right? So the fact that now you have this show and I could be on and help and assist, I'm very grateful, so I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, well, let's dive right in. Talk about your story. So you said it was culture shock coming to RMU. So tell where you from and your journey to Robert Morris, and then what was your life experiences like in that transition for you?
Sure. Well, originally from Brooklyn, New York.
I could hear it.
Yeah,
I didn't know if it was West Brooklyn or not, but I could hear the accent.
I'm glad you could hear. I'm not a Steeler fan too, just so you know.
What?
Nah, you were gonna say that, right? I know. From Brooklyn, New York, had a wonderful opportunity to be recruited by RMC at that time, and other schools in Florida, had other schools in New York City, but I was like, man, Vlad, you got to get out of your element. You got to get out, be exposed to something different, be exposed to just different things, but close enough where I could at least be closer with my mom, right? Because yes, I am a mama's boy. It is what it is. Got recruited, loved it, and I remember my first day, I got off the Greyhound bus, and I had to take something they called a jitney. We called it dollar cabs or cabs. It was a jitney from the downtown station all the way to Robert Morris, and I literally had one big bag, right? And I got on campus. It was beautiful. It was, green grass, like paved roads. You know, individuals will walk by and don't even know me, smiling and nodding, and I'm like, yo, I'm on the moon. Like, where am I, right? But it was great. But I do think it was culture shock because I'm originally from Haiti as well. So understanding to getting on a college campus and not seeing individuals who look like you, and when you're in the classroom, you're literally one of 30 people and you're the only African American in that room. A lot of times you almost feel like the finger's pointed at you, or you speak for a specific group, right? So God forbid we're talking about slavery or something specific to African Americans, you know, the teacher's talking and like you can almost feel everybody just kind of like turning and like looking at Vlad, and Vlad's like, nah, I don't know, I wasn't there. It wasn't me, I don't know. But I do
that pressure is real though, right? Like, that's a
man.
real pressure that people face when they go in the spaces and they're the only one, where and sometimes people don't even realize that they're doing that. They just say, so this is true, right? Or even like last night, like there's the Democratic debate, and Cory Booker said something. He said, in the community that I come from, we have a saying, and then, you know, Trevor Noah was like, white people were looking at me like, is that a saying?
Is that saying like
is that real?
Can you verify?
I've never heard of that, but so it is. That pressure is real. It's uncomfortable.
Yes,
but you're 19 years old, you're 18 years old feeling this, right? And so what did that do for you?
You know, I do believe that it's only at the edge of being uncomfortable is when you begin to learn. And if you think about growth and comfort, it can't coexist, right? They can't. So I do believe that sometimes you have to be in uncomfortable situations, let that build on like your field of experience, like almost take that, put it on your Batman belt and say, you know what, I remember that moment. I may have acted or done something crazy at that time, but I know I'm gonna be put in that position again. Let me learn from that. So at 18, 19, I felt like who I am today, I had to experience that. Like I had to be in that room and have tough conversations with roommates who don't look like you or completely different backgrounds, and them trying to understand like, hey, if I'm gonna put my shoes over here, you're not gonna steal it, right? And me having that conversation to say, nah, bro, my shoes look better than yours. You know, so it's good to go through that, especially at a young age. Of course, you're gonna go through different things, but I think having mentors at Robert Morris was huge. Dr. Rex Crawley, just someone again who looked like you to kind of say, hey, this experience. But even someone who didn't look like you, like Dean Jameson at that time, and just talking to him because he's a white man. You know, I'm not saying from the privileged area, but completely different backgrounds. But he's still a male figure. He can still talk to you from the male perspective and say, hey, Vlad, you know, look at it this way, look at it this way. And then I could even educate him like, well, but they don't look at you how they look at me. Like, so we kind of had a good relationship, but the pressure was real, you know, especially coming from a single family home where you're off to college and you're playing football, but you better be going to class. Vlad, you have to come back to Brooklyn and have some type of credential.
Wow.
I'm not sending you away for you to have fun. And I'm like, man, but everybody else is having fun. Like, why can't I have fun? So that even that pressure of being, you know, a young black kid and being the first to go to college and the expectation that you have to succeed.
So you're the first as well, too? Or you fall oldest, youngest, middle, or you, where do you fall on the line? And
well, my cousins from my mom's side, so a little bit behind my backstory is that, so my mom was from Haiti. She came here like maybe 79 or 80, couldn't speak one lick of English, couldn't speak it. I was born in 1982. I was here for about 6 months in Brooklyn, New York. She had to get a job, but she couldn't not speak the language and take care of a baby boy. So she sent me to Haiti to live for about 6 or 7 years. So I went there for when I was about 6 months, came back to New York City, had to assimilate, get back to the culture, understand the language, and go into kindergarten, right? So growing up, my family, the Haitian culture, everyone is almost like your mom, right? Your aunts, your cousins, even your cousins who are probably best friends, they're called your cousins, right? But education is something that they push beyond anything, whether you're in poverty, whether you're privileged, whether you have money, it does not matter in the Haitian culture. You have to be educated. You have to believe in God, but they may even think you have to be educated first before that, right? So college was huge. So college was always something that, Vlad, you're gonna do no matter what. You're not gonna be on the block. You may not even play sports, but I want you to go to school. But my mom couldn't go to school at that time because she had to work. And I only met my dad when I was about 21 years old, and that's a whole other story. So I didn't even have that male figure around anyway. So I kind of had to learn from my mom do's and don'ts. But I did have cousins who were in high school they were going to college as well, but they stayed in the city. I was the first to ever leave Brooklyn. Wow. So I left that environment and haven't been back since, right? But I was the first to go and kind of be away. So
man, you talk about the incredible mindset that you had to have, the grit to take a jitney from downtown to Robert Morris, right, to this campus that's very different than Brooklyn, New York, right?
Sir.
Like, and so Brooklyn is what you would call an urban area. It's got houses that might be a little closer together,
Yes, sir.
Very close to the city, and Moon is suburban America.
yes, yes, it was.
So when you were there, you know, just what propelled you on the next phase? Because you were always a hard worker, but you always also had this certain thing as well too, and you started getting involved in certain things. Talk about your transition sort of out of college into your professional space. How'd you get to where you are right now?
Yeah, you said grit, which is so interesting because I've read about grit now. Now it's actually in the dictionary, right? And they're doing leadership seminars and presentations on the whole term of grit. And I forget the woman's name who coined the term.
Angela Duckworth.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, I know something duck, right? I remember it. There you go. But what's so interesting about that is there's still not necessarily a definition of it, right? Because if you think of grit, even it almost be like if someone has grit, it's almost, and I'm assuming, it's almost like they have to come from an impoverished background. I mean, the 8 ball was right in front of them from the jump. Not necessarily. You can still come from a privileged background and have grit. And I use, for example, Tim Tebow. Right? People may look at him, white male, privilege, does this, but he still bust his butt to get where he was at. He had some form of grit, right? It wasn't because of his circumstances that gave him grit. But for some reason, I think it's the Haitian culture in me. we're not complacent individuals. And I always go back, we were the first independent republic back in 1804. We said, listen, we'd rather die on our feet than be enslaved on our knees, right?
Wow.
So that whole mindset, my mom just pushed into us, you know? So every time I'm at something to do something, I always just want to be better, no matter what it is, whether it's football, whether it's education, whether it's school. Like, I want to learn more. I want to expose myself. Yes, I'm African American, and yes, I'm Haitian, but I want to learn about my teammate who's Asian. You know, I want to learn about a girl that I'm dating who's white now. Like, I want to learn about that culture. I'm really, I'm inquisitive. I want to know what's going on. So I already was a people's person, and networking just came fairly simple to me. And what I mean by simple is just that I would be an initiator of conversation. I would find a common ground that you and I have, and I would focus on that common ground, not on what you look like, not on your gender, not on your sex, not on your orientation. Oh, you like Cheetos? Bro, me too.
The great equalizer.
The great equalizer,
Cheetos
right?
and Taco Bell can pretty much solve any.
I'm telling you. So the great thing about that is once you started networking, I was introduced and put in different spaces that if I wasn't talking or initiating the conversation, I probably wouldn't be put into.
So tell me about your network then, right? Like, so that's a thing that you very strategically and intentionally did, and so your network that's part of how you made your jump, right? So your capacity to do great work, but also your network and who you knew and the work that you were doing at each level of those phases. Talk about that and what the lessons that you learned about being inclusive in having a broad network.
You know, I always thought about this too, is that you can't be the smartest person on your team. If you're the smartest person on your team, you need a new team, right? So when you have that network, you're gonna be a novice in something. So therefore, if you have someone who's the business oriented, someone who's the marketing person, someone who's the data analyst person, and then you got a great team, because now whatever facet you're trying to get into, you have someone who's more strategic and more focused and know more about that area. That's your network. So I always said, all right, Vlad, you definitely need an education specialist on your squad. You have to have someone who understands college systems, someone who knows about financial aid, just someone who could get someone into the door, right? Second thing, you gotta have someone in social services, because wanting to work in education, you're kind of a social worker,
right?
But when you're working in education, you need resources, you need support. You're getting kids from Brooklyn, from Maryland, who coming up to Robert Morris. They don't know about all these things that their counterparts who don't look like them do. So you have to have those individuals. So from that network of people that I've met, that I've kind of clung to, it kind of launched me into working in education. I was working at Family Links, which was an at-risk shelter home for youth ages 13 to 18. That allowed me that provided me the sympathy and empathetic responses that we need in order to be like model citizens.
Say that again. The sympathy and empathetic responses. Help me tease that out for me.
So I think in life is not about you. It truly is what you do for people. That's what I feel. I'm not saying it's written in stone, but that's what I feel. But I think before you do that, you kind of have to understand what empathy and sympathy is. Two separate things. One is saying, I understand how you feel, right? Another one is saying, I've been through it, I know how you feel. So if I'm in the business of serving people, I have to have sympathetic and empathetic responses. So therefore, because I didn't go through what you went through, I have to have sympathy to say, you know what? You're not mad at me because your student refund check didn't show up today. You're probably just upset, right? It's not me you're upset at, you're just upset at that reason. That's sympathy, right? Or, I know why you didn't go to your class. Your brother just died. That's an empathetic response. My brother was killed, so I understand that. So that's where anything I do, I'm sympathetic and both empathetic responses, no matter what you are, who you are, what you look like. I'm dealing with students who are, in my current role, transgender students, right? That's even beyond empathetic and sympathetic responses.
Right.
That's not talking to an individual where they don't even feel wanted in their body, right? So you have this understanding, kind of sit down and talk to them, say, listen, I am with you, I got your back, let's do this together. Because they need that. You need that network, you need that person on your team. So that just followed me all through education. And then,
was that a natural thing for you? So I mean, I think there's people that are listening even now that struggle with the idea of being empathetic for people that are different for them. What they don't also realize is you've been conditioned to think about everybody as others, right? Like, and so like, I was at a church talking about like, in your church, you're taught to love people, but really you're also taught to think that your church is a little bit better than other religions. And so when this is sort of the framework all the time, and there's people that are saying, how do you have the conversation with a trans person? How do you have a conversation with a person who I know that they're selling drugs to make money to be in this environment? Like, how do you, and your response sounds like empathy, but how do you start that process, right? Like, how, if I'm new to this and I want to engage kind of and do some of the things that you're doing, like, how do I just start that process?
I think it really starts with, you know, we all have values, right? But I really think it all falls down to your internal mission statement. Like, we all should have an internal mission statement. It could be simple as I want to be a good person, right? Or it could be, I want to make the most money, so therefore my family doesn't have to suffer or whatever, right? As long you have your internal mission statement, right? So I think it first starts with that. But that I think it also goes to, what role do you play in this society? Like, what role do you play in life? You are not above anyone. I truly feel we may have more money than each other. We may look better, thinner, more muscular built. We're truly not better than the next person. We just happen to have better genes or something, right? So when it comes down to thinking about empathetic and sympathetic responses, I really truly think it's internally you're going, you know, I'm not better than Paul. Let me hear Paul's story. Let me try to understand if I could walk 2 feet in his shoes for just 3 seconds. Let me see if I can understand that. If I even just think and I'm able to humble myself, right? Take ego and pride away and just try to be in Paul's shoes for maybe 3 seconds, I think that starts that process. You may not be empathetic right there or sympathetic right there, but if you just start almost like practicing that,
right,
like almost like active listening. I used to be the worst listener until I took an active listening course, and listening, I'm like, whoa, Vlad, you have to really practice at this. You have to sit there, tune out, not think of an answer before the person's talking, listen to the person. And now I feel like I do that. But it took time. It just didn't happen over. So I'm thinking if someone starts by saying, okay, I know who I am, I have my mission statement, I'm listening to this individual, I want to understand, right? I want to understand. Let me see if I could walk 2 feet in their shoes. Let me hear their story from there. And I think that it kind of starts. And then that's when you could probably now start exposing yourself to different things. It's still something internally you want to do, because people can't force you to do it.
Yeah.
You have to want to go and do it. When your profession entails it, then that's a necessity, right? But there's certain professions where people don't have to really talk to individuals, right? But now what happens is they stay in that bubble that they've created, and they don't know, not that they don't know any better, they don't know enough.
Yeah.
Right?
There's so much that I want to get to, and we only have a little bit of time left.
Sure.
But one of the things that I appreciate that you've done, so you talked about serving trans students, for instance, at your institution, but you also have a significant population of folks that are older, right? And so you've created a space where in the same class setting is a 17-year-old and a 65-year-old, and they both have very real opinions. Talk about how you did that. What was that process like? And it sounds like your core values are starting to come out in the conversation, this idea of empathy. But what does that play out? What does it look like from a leader's perspective to make that work?
Yeah. So, you know, you think of non-traditional students, at CCAC it is. But when you think of education, it's owed to everyone. You know, whether you're 19, 25, 55, 75, 82 years old, it's kind of old. But when you're in that classroom, and it kind of goes into the conversation I was having to prior to starting this, is that you think of diversity is that, okay, we're all in the classroom, right? Diversity, you have a older black female, younger white male, middle age white female, and whatever, and then you have an Asian student, right? Yes, that class is diverse, but is inclusivity practiced in that class? You don't know until that older black female is allowed to stand up and maybe lead a session for a PowerPoint presentation, right? Now you're hearing their point. That white male now could lead a session or talk or give his viewpoint on the subject matter pertaining to the class topic of that day. Now that's inclusive, right? So the way we look at Homewood Brushton Center, we're like, listen, if we're gonna help with retention and if we're gonna help with an enrollment, someone walking by the center has to feel welcomed. So they have to know that if I'm an older black female that I just changed careers, do I feel like I could be in a classroom with all young folks? But if I know that Vlad has people that are my age or people that look like me in that room, then I can maybe take that step or that opportunity to get into. So something we focused on was, if not diversity, but definitely inclusivity, where everyone is represented in that classroom. It's easier said than done, because it all depends on people who want to enroll. But anytime we've created like pseudo flyers or pseudo programming, it's not always just a black person on the screen. It's not always just a white person on the flyer. It's an older Asian woman, right? It's there's someone who you would think, like, oh, whoa, that person is that. I did not think that white people are even in Homewood. It was very intentional on how we try to process that. But now, what that allowed now with retention purposes is when you're in that classroom and you have, if you think about society, I think right now we have almost, there's 6 technical generations that are in the workforce. You have the traditionalist population, baby boomers, let's see, Gen Y, Gen X, millennials, and now you have Gen Zs, right?
Gen Z, yeah.
They're all in one classroom. And I think what's so great about that, they all can learn from each other. The traditionalists are the old school rigor. I've worked in the mill, I've bust my butt, I'm gonna put in my time. The Gen Zs are like, I got Facebook, I got Instagram, this is where I get my news, They both could teach each other in the classroom. And when students now could teach each other in the classroom, that pedagogy goes throughout the roof now. Now, it's beyond learning. You're now using application by learning as well now too, because now I get to talk to someone who's been through something, right? And if I'm an older student, I get to talk to a younger student and say, hey, school me to the game. Like, what is an Excel spreadsheet? Like, how can I use that to budget my family finances,
Yeah, and sometimes when we do presentations, we throw out the word imagine. Say, imagine a space that does this, that cares for this person, whatnot. In the world that you're creating, you've imagined that, and then a lot of times people can't imagine that thing happening and transitioning into the community. They can't imagine what that looks like where these generations are talking, because we don't see it. We don't see it anywhere. We don't see it on television, right? Like we see folks. No one listens, as you talked about earlier, like that idea of active listening. It's really a lot of this.
Yeah.
And so what does that look like? How can that be played out in corporate spaces and in community spaces?
Well, community spaces, I think is a little bit more easier in community spaces because my role is to serve the community. So I want to listen. I want to make sure that we cater to them instead of them catering to us. So for example, is that normal class times are like, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m. But if I'm working with the YMCA and they have a group of students who need to take a business class, but they only could take that class at 3 o'clock, well, I'm gonna now change the time of that class to accommodate that group of individuals, right? But I think the thought process, it really comes to like effort though. I know it sounds simple, right? But it really comes to effort. Like if I want the community to change, or if I'm a community member or a leader in the community and I want the community to change, my effort has to be intentional on who I reach out to. Do I have meetings? Do I have the right network team? Like, you have to almost be a little strategic on who you talk to and why you talk to those people.
Right.
Now, in corporate spaces, it's a little bit different because at the end of the day, it's really what bottom dollar, right? And I think sometimes when we live in a monetary society, we always think of, like, there's certain individuals probably at my place of employment that sees a student, but sees a dollar sign because it's enrollment growth, right? I never see a student as a dollar, and I'm not telling you that just to tell you. I swear to goodness, every time I see a student, I see a student. How can I service you? What can we do? Okay, what can you need help? Blah, blah, blah. So I can't speak to the corporate side because I don't have that mind frame, right? If I was working at a corporate, maybe my mind frame would be a little bit differently because there's no gray. It's black, white. Did you make your numbers? Did you not? If you did not, sorry, we'll see you next week, all right? Or we'll see you at another time. But if I'm on this side where, in education, where there's a lot more gray nowadays, I could work within that space because I could always find different things to do and how I can maybe tweak something to make it beneficial.
Yeah.
So I can't speak to the corporate side, but I can speak to the community side. I really think it starts with effort.
So your message is, it sounds like you're talking about effort. you talk about empathy. You talk about this idea of just putting forth the work and making that happen. And one of the things that I appreciate that you put great effort in is your dress. I've always been jealous of your...
Well, you know.
No, listen, man. Like I remember one time I was like, I'm gonna try to dress up and match where Vlad is at. And I walked in my best, and you came into your best, and I was like, nope.
Oh, no,
nope. I came in third again.
No.
Vlad is first and second. So real quick, tell us what do you like to do for fun?
Oh, sure. I thoroughly enjoy spending time with my children. Being a dad is probably the best job in the world.
Ain't it fun?
It's so fun. And then especially, growing up without a father, I do have a great relationship with him now. My father, I do. He's being the best granddad that he can because he wasn't the best dad that he was. Yeah. And I think that's beneficial when you see what he does when I watch him with my kids. I enjoy working out. Like you gotta feed your body, but you gotta, feed it some weights, or just running. That's pretty much it. Like if I'm not at work or if I'm not at community events, I really like to do nothing too. Like nothing is fun, if that makes sense.
It is fun. So where can people find you on if they wanted to connect with you later?
Sure. I mean, my Instagram is. I got to think about it.
Wait a minute.
I'm a millennial. I said, wait a minute. No, it is Vladimir1914 on Instagram and DrVladimir St on Facebook, and you could Google Vladimir too, because I'm one of the few African Americans named Vladimir.
Yeah, there's like 2 in the world.
Literally.
Thank you so much, man. I have an incredible amount of respect for you, for what you've done and who you are and what you mean to both the community and to me personally. Thanks for being on the show, and I hope that we can do this again.
Oh, my
have
God.
You back on the show.
Thank you so much, and Paul, I got your back no matter what you do, bro.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that. Well, listen, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, make sure that you keep listening, subscribe, share with your friends, and make sure that you keep on keeping on. Until next time, take care.